Hey there, podcast enthusiasts. Are you ready to add a little sparkle to your day? If you're loving the insightful conversations and captivating stories on Mirror Talk Podcast, here's a friendly nudge to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on the empowering messages and thought provoking discussions we bring to your ears. But wait, there's more. We're all about spreading positivity and inspiration, and you can be a part of it too. How? By sharing the love with your friends and family. Share this episode with your loved ones, and let's create a ripple effect of empowerment and growth together. And hey, if you've been enjoying what you hear, why not take a moment to leave us a glowing 5-star review? Your feedback fuels our passion to keep delivering content that resonates with you. So hit that subscribe button, share the love, and leave us a review. Let's keep the conversation going and spread the Mirror Talk magic far and wide. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, your support means the world to us.
Today's guest is a founder of From, a company that enables large brands to win in the digital space. He's also the author of Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Winning Digital Customers. He and his team help companies grow revenue across digital channels and have created many award-winning web and mobile products for shopping, banking, travel, and entertainment. Welcome to the show, Howard. How are you doing?
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Toby.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Mirror Talk Podcast. I really appreciate your presence right now, and I'm looking forward to everything I'm going to learn from you. While preparing for this conversation, I found out that you have a very deep passion for digital innovation and helping each of your clients to find success, and that's why I'm so delighted to be speaking with you today. So, how did this passion come to life, and how has it helped you in pivoting your life and career journey so far?
Well, I think it's two things. First of all, before I was doing digital work, I was working in the theater, creating, plays, directing plays, things like that. And I really loved from a very young age creating experiences for people, experiences that would amaze and delight people, as a great show does.
Yeah.
And that's always been something that's really made me feel great, to be able to create something that was really exciting for other people. And so as the digital world became commercialized, as the internet became real in the late 90s, I also started to work in that space. And while it's different in many ways, it also has a lot of similarities. And of course, the work that I do today is a lot about how do I create a great experience for a customer who's renting a car, or someone who's ordering food, or someone who's trying to check their accounts online, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing is, as I worked professionally and I worked with a lot of large brands and a lot of, great people at large brands, I love to see people successful. I love to see people have their own victories. And so I've had the great privilege to be able to be brought in to work with people at a lot of different big companies who are trying to get something done. And if I can come there and help them find that path of success, which is sometimes elusive. It's challenging to get major products launched at large companies and adopted by customers. And if I can help them do that, that's very rewarding for me, because they're such good people. I get an opportunity to work with really, really good people at lots of companies. And if I can help support their success, then that's great. That makes me very fulfilled.
Yes, that's awesome. And I've been going through your work so far, and I was like, yeah, it's so wonderful what you've been doing for big brands like for Universal Studio, General Motors, and a lot of other big companies and big names out there. So I mean, it must really be working for you, basically. It's an awesome job you do. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, listen, most of us in our professional world, we find our niche. We find the thing that we know how to do best. Some people run a very high-end restaurant where, the food is very expensive and it's very exclusive, and other people run McDonald's, and
Yes.
and you can make more money at McDonald's than you can at a high-end restaurant. There's every different model is totally legitimate. There are
Yes.
people who's, are providing SEO services for $500 a month to thousands of businesses. and there are consulting companies that have just a couple of many multi-million-dollar clients, you know, and they're all perfectly valid business models. I grew up my professional world at big consulting firms like Ernst & Young and Capgemini. And so I came to learn how to work with big companies. And so that's who I work with, big companies. But, you know, like I say, other people work with smaller companies, medium-sized companies, and it's all equally, you know, legit. It's just a question of what your expertise is, because working with big companies is different. I'd probably be bad at working with little companies. You know, I wouldn't know how to help them as well, because it's not what I've done most of my career.
Yeah, yeah. And you are known, and you also run like a digital transformation agency. So how would you describe this? How would you define digital transformation, and how do we know when it is done?
Yeah. Well, the way, you know, most companies talk about digital transformation as kind of just a generic term for anything they need to do in digital at their company. But I think that in order to really define digital transformation, you have to look at it a little differently. You have to look at the world, and perhaps even more important, your customers, and the change that has happened in our customers over the last 10, 15 years, because it's profound. You know, transformation is just a fancy word for change anyway, right? So what is the digital change that has happened with our customers? And the answer is that, you know, the iPhone was first launched something like 15, 16 years ago, something like that. Or maybe 17 years ago, when the apps became available 14, 15 years ago, something like that. And in that period of time, that smartphone, whether you have Apple or Samsung or another brand, has become really the center of so many people's lives. It's how we shop. It's how we do our banking. It's how we date. It's how we consume all kinds of media. It's hard to imagine any aspect of people's lives that is not now centered around these digital devices. And that's pretty new, right? It's not that we weren't, of course, people were shopping online before that, but the amount of, and the focus of it has changed a lot. And so what that means is that for most businesses, their customer has changed, has transformed many of their behaviors and also some of their priorities and some of their needs as a result of this massive shift. And as the business, the number one criteria of a successful business is its relevance to its customers. If you run a business that does something that your customers need and they want you to do it, then you're probably running a great business. And if you run a business that is out of step with your customers' needs, then you're probably in trouble. And so when customers change, especially when they change so profoundly, businesses have to rethink. You can't be the same old bank, the same old travel agency, the same old airline, the same old hotel, the same whole insurance company, the same whole old hamburger stand today that you were 15 years ago. And if you're trying to be, you're probably struggling and you're probably in the decline. And so I think that, you know, you have to start by looking at that external component of digital transformation and say, how has my customer changed? And then as a business, as a company, how do I need to change to make sure that I'm keeping up with that customer and maximizing my relevance to that customer who's now living a digital lifestyle?
Yes, I love the fact that you mentioned relevance, because the title of your book is Winning Digital Customers, the antidote to irrelevance, the antidote to irrelevance. So can you tell us about this book a little bit, and how we could use this book to, you know, fight against irrelevance in our organizations?
Yeah. Well, that's the big risk for any business, right? And if we look over the last 5 or 10 years, we see, certainly here in the United States, I don't know as much brands in every country around the world, but brands like Circuit City and Toys R Us and, you know, Borders. I mean, there's many major brands that have either gone out of business or been marginalized because they just didn't keep up and they were no longer as relevant as they used to be. And by the way, there's all kinds of new brands that have grown in the last 15 years to become monsters and behemoths, you know, brands like Uber and Airbnb and Facebook and Amazon and et cetera, et cetera. So it's been a time of great change, and it's an opportunity and a threat if you do or do not keep up. So that risk of irrelevance is very real. The book it's a plan. It's a blueprint. I've had just the really good fortune over the last couple of decades to work with dozens and dozens and dozens of large brands on their digital transformations, on their efforts to change to meet the needs of digital customers. And, you know, I've been a part of some really, really big, successful programs at some major brands, which is super rewarding. And I'll tell you, I've been a part of some really big failures too. And, there's a great quote from Bill Gates. He says, success is a lousy teacher, and obviously by which he means.
Yeah.
So the things that didn't work teach us sometimes much more than the things that did work. And so I've done both and have been both a participant and a spectator to both. And so after all those years and years of doing it, I've been able to figure out at least some paths that tend to lead to success, some ways of approaching it that are more likely than not to get you the outcome you want, and how to avoid the common pitfalls that many companies and leaders fall into, reasonable pitfalls that would seem logical at the time. But if you've already done it 20 times, oh yeah, I know it sounds logical, but don't do it that way. I've seen it fail over and over and over. So the book is a 5-step methodology to approaching digital transformation, laying out 5 key steps that any company, large or small, can follow to at least maximize their chance of success and their efficiency at changing to stay relevant to today's digital customer.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And, I will encourage everyone to get this book. It's on Amazon. I'll place the link in the show note of this episode for anyone who's interested. You can just click on it, copy the link, and order the book. It's available there. It's not expensive, and it's life transformative, basically, I would say. Yeah. So,
thank you.
In the book also, you talked about design thinking and journey mapping. Can you enlighten me on this a little bit?
Sure. So, well, let me talk about journey mapping first. Journey mapping is a process of laying out what your customer experience either is or could be, but laying out graphically the customer experience step by step. So things like, how does the customer find out about your business in the first place? Where do they hear about it? What causes them to want the services that your business provides? If you're an orthopedist, then, people fall and break their leg. That's what causes them to want your service. Not everybody wants an orthopedist, right? Yeah. Not everybody wants, not everybody wants a florist. What causes somebody to want a florist? Well, and of course there may not be one thing, but to understand what triggers people, then how do they go about finding a florist or whatever? What's the process? Yeah. How do they decide on picking one? And then once they've picked a florist or whatever business you are, how do they decide what to purchase? How do they decide how much to spend, and the other factors that they have to decide. And then how does the transaction go? What makes them satisfied or dissatisfied after they've made a purchase? And what makes them more or less likely to come back to the same business again and again? Laying out that complete process that someone goes through. And I like to think of journey mapping as being in 2 steps. First is which is current state journey mapping. A lot of people really get excited about the second step, which is the future. Right? What should it be? What should the experience be? And of course, that's critical. But I always believe that you can make a mistake and jump to the future without making sure you've really taken the time to understand what actually happens today. Because especially with the larger companies that I work with, executives who work in an office building somewhere may say, oh, well, here's what happens in our stores. Customers come in and they do this and they do that. And well, that may or may not be true. We always advocate really doing customer research, spending time in the stores, interviewing customers, interviewing the people that work in the stores to really understand what really happens. Do customers have a simple, smooth, easy experience? Or are there all kinds of challenges and problems? And of course, you're going to have a diversity of experiences. Some customers may come in and have a good experience. Others have certain challenges and problems. But really understanding that and understanding where are the places where your business is creating pain, inconvenience, frustration, friction, disappointment, anger, fury in your customers right now, and being honest about that and being curious about that. This is actually one of the number 1 keys to success, because fixing these things is probably your first and easiest opportunity to create an improved experience, more loyal customers, et cetera. But then of course, the second step is to say, okay, well, this is what it is today. This is what happens today. Sometimes customers wait 45 minutes in line, and sometimes they get to the front of the line and the cashier doesn't have the price, and then they have to call and somebody has to go check it, and everyone in line waits, and et cetera, right? And then they put the stuff in the bag, and sometimes the bag breaks, and they can't find and the wheel falls off the shopping cart, and they can't find their car in the parking lot. These are all the things that happen, right?
Yes.
I parked at IKEA the other day, and we had a big shopping cart full of stuff because, IKEA, like you buy furniture and bookcases. We bought a bunch of plants. You have IKEA by you, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So we bought a bunch of big plants. So I had this huge, it wasn't even a shopping cart. It was like one of those pallet things, like you're pushing, and I'm pushing it through the shopping cart, and it was cold too. It was like 20 degrees out, and we were looking for our car. We wandered around that parking lot for like 20 minutes, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, where the heck is the car? Finally, I found out that there's actually parking lots on both sides of the store, which I didn't realize. And we had come out on the opposite side of the store when we came in. So we were walking around for 20 minutes in the completely wrong parking lot. And you could argue that was our fault. We should have noticed where we parked. But you could also argue that the business should have done more to prevent me from making that mistake. I've been in parking lots where every level doesn't just have a letter like A, B, C, D. It has a theme. This is the jazz level. This is the opera level. There'll be pictures, things that you'll remember. They're working extra hard to be sure that you don't accidentally forget where you parked your car and have that negative experience. So the future journey map is laying that out, saying, how would it be different? How will they use a mobile app to order before they get to the store? How will it be easier to get customer service? How will it be easier and faster to pay? How will we make the experience more delightful and remove points of pain? And so that's journey mapping. Of course, there's a lot more to it than I'm describing here, but I spend probably 100 pages in the book about specific techniques for how do you actually do this successfully. So you wind up with the vision of the future, not just a vision that says, in the future, we will provide an extremely convenient experience to our customers and more return to our shareholders. Well, okay, that's great, but you can't really implement that. A journey map is something you could implement. It says there's going to be a chat bot. There's going to be an alerting system that lets you know when you have to do something. There's going to be a way, a kiosk. It's that level of detail so that you can understand what you have to go build to create that future journey. And that's what journey mapping is.
Oh, okay, that's good. And what is now design thinking when we've turned them up?
And by the way, I should add, both journey mapping and design thinking are disciplines that, my team and I certainly did not invent either of these things, right? We use great thinking by others about how to do these things. And of course, that means over time, we've created our own versions and variations of it. And we've learned things that work well when you're doing these things and things that don't work well. So a lot of the book is describing these things, but also giving tips based on our experience about how to do it in a way that we find the most effective. So design thinking is an approach to product development, which is designed to ensure that as you build a specific individual product, whether it's an app or whether it's a chatbot or whether it's a store or a kiosk or a CRM tool for your call center, as you're building one particular thing, how do you do that in the way that's the most likely to be successful? And it includes methods for doing customer research before you think about what the feature should be, to make sure you understand the needs of that customer, and then to create prototypes, and then to test those prototypes with customers so that you're avoiding the temptation that a lot of people have to say, oh, I know what it should be. I know what the app should be like, and turn it into like your own personal creative expression and design something and build something and spend millions of dollars on it, only to discover that, yeah, you built your favorite app, but it's actually not what most of your customers want. And there's huge numbers of examples. Most big companies you go to have all kinds of stories of things they've launched that were not successful with customers. And when asked, well, what kind of validation did you do? How much prototyping did you do? How much did you test this with customers before you built it? Usually the answer is, yeah, we didn't really do that. And when you look at those companies that launch things that are really successful, usually it's not because they were geniuses and got it right the first time. It was because they had an idea, they built an inexpensive prototype, they tested it, they learned which aspects work and are good, which aspects seemed like a good idea, but actually didn't work that well. And then they can rework the prototype, and prototypes are cheap to change. Actual products are not so cheap to change. So that by the time you build something, you kind of know how successful it's going to be, or at least you've massively increased the odds. And so if you think about the relationship between journey mapping and design thinking, journey map is about helping you figure out what's that 10,000 foot view of the whole journey. And design thinking is then when you have to zoom in and say, okay, well, in order to make that journey, I have to build a whole bunch of individual things. And, one of them is the signage to make sure that you don't forget where your car is, So, okay, now when we're specifically working on the signage, design thinking gives you specific methods to do that one part well, not just so that it connects with the journey, but so that it is optimized in its own right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. That means each company has to like sit down, figure out which of the customer or user experience they have to improve, and you're able to know what impact that will have on their company also.
Yeah.
Ah,
And
okay.
these principles, design thinking is used by so many of the top companies who are the most successful at creating great customer experiences, Apple and Nike and Airbnb and others. They all have spoken publicly about how they use design thinking as a key tool to help them create so many successful products.
Yes, that's good. But for a large organization, for example, like from your experience, there are some companies or organizations that have been so old, or they've been in existence for a long time before the digital space came to existence. So how would you convince such a large organization that is so ancient already to, pivot its way or to invest into the digital space also?
I had a little hard time. You broke up there for a second. Can you just repeat that question?
Yeah, no problem. I can repeat the question. Yes. So I was talking about, large organizations that have already, established their names and their existence, but they're like ancient companies already. How would you persuade such large organizations to make investment necessary to win in the digital space?
Yeah. It's funny. It makes me think of, I just did an article, Shakespeare's birthday is coming up.
Yeah.
And I just did an article with like 10 quotes from Shakespeare to help with your digital transformation. And one of them is from Hamlet, and Ophelia says, "We know what we are, but we know not what we may be." And, one of the things that people and companies sometimes have trouble is imagining what they might be. We become very fixated on what we are now. And when someone says, "Oh, we should create a whole new method of selling our products to our customers, or we should create totally different products," it can feel like, yeah, that doesn't sound like us. That's not who we are. And that's one of many of the points of resistance that organizations have to change. And those leaders who are trying to drive digital transformation organizations, they have to figure out how to get people to sign up for what may be very significant changes to how the company makes money, changes to the brand, changes to the marketing, changes to people's roles and responsibilities, all kinds of things. And that's scary for a lot of people. So you're right. It can be difficult. In the book, I talk about many reasons why organizations resist change and a number of different techniques to overcome it. I'll mention a few. One is you have to create what they call a burning platform, because, if everything is good and there's no risk to not changing, well, changing is always going to be risky because you're going to the unknown. You don't know if the change is really going to work. As I mentioned before, lots of things fail. And so if you could continue your business and be super successful without changing anything, that would be the thing to do.
Yes.
I mean, why change? Why take that risk? It would be foolish. So, but the thing is, based on what we talked about earlier, the world is changing. So you really don't have the opportunity in the vast majority of businesses to say, let's just keep doing the same thing and we can expect the same results. If you keep doing the same thing as you were doing in the past, you can expect your results to get worse and worse and worse and worse, because you're falling more and more out of step with a changing world. And so you have to help people understand that first and foremost, why it's not acceptable to just change, to just stay the same, or to just do those little tiny changes. Oh, well, let's change the tagline, or, well, let's refresh the colors on the website, right? That is not transformation, right? And those types of changes, well, if the world is undergoing and your customers undergoing a profound change, and you try to execute a small cosmetic change, it's not going to be nearly enough. It's not going to help you avoid irrelevance. So you have to help convey that and convince people of that, not just with the generic argument like I'm giving here, but with facts and figures. Show me why that's true. Research your customers, survey them, get industry data. It depends on your industry, but there's a lot of data and statistics in my book, of course, and people can leverage those. But of course, it's not specific to any individual industry. So making sure you can really say why we can't stay the same. But even when you've done that, even if you've got let's say you're talking to your board of directors or your management committee, even if you've got everyone to agree that we need to change, it doesn't mean that you've got everyone on board, because it's sort of like Everyone in my family might agree that we should go on vacation.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean we all agree where we should go on vacation.
No.
So we could still have a huge argument and wind up going nowhere because we can't agree. And so you have to sell them not just on the necessity of change, but on a specific vision of what that change is.
Yeah.
The customer journey that I described before is an example that this is the new experience that we want to deliver for our customers. And here is why this vision, this experience is going to keep us relevant. And then the last thing I'll say about it, and again, I talk more detail about this in the book, but obviously we only have so much time here, is then you have to overcome fear of failure. So step one, you have to convince them we need to change. Step two, you have to convince them to do a specific change. But even when you convince them that your customer journey vision would be great, customers would love it if we could make these changes. They're probably going to think, yeah, but can we? Yeah, but will we be successful? Can we really execute that? And so now you have to convince them that that is possible. What's it going to cost? What are we going to need? And why should everyone from the board of directors all the way down to the guy who sweeps the floor, why should every single person believe that the company can make those changes? Because, it's like that old cliche, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, either way, you're right. And it's absolutely true. Confidence is critical from the leadership all the way through the organization.
That's true. That's very true. I love the fact that, you talked about these challenges also in your book, like what executive could face in digital space also. And one of the points you made there was inadequate funding, for example. So if an organization approaches you, Howard, and asks, okay, yeah, we're ready to make this digital transformation into the digital space, but we don't have that funding. We don't think we have that funding to, promote this. How should they go about this then?
Well, first of all, I'd say if you lack funding, you're not ready.
Yeah.
And it's not only because you don't have the money, because I would ask another question. Why do you lack funding? And there's only two reasons you could lack funding. Reason number one, you have absolutely no money.
Yeah.
That's rarely the case with the companies I work with, right?
Yeah,
you have no money. You have no line of credit. You literally have no way to get any money. Okay. That could be the case. I don't work with companies that are in that situation, but I suppose if it was a small company, maybe. But more likely, you don't have the money because it hasn't been made a priority, because someone hasn't decided that we should spend the money that we do have on this, which says to me that you lack not just money, but you lack alignment. You lack buy-in. And if you don't have that, then even if you do have money, you're going to fail. I've seen cases where the CEO believes in the transformation and the CEO says, I'm going to allocate the budget. Here's the money. But the other key vice presidents and senior vice presidents in the company didn't really believe in it. If you can't get at least the top leadership behind it, no matter how much money you have, you're not going to be able to drive the change you need because people are going to resist it. They're going to sabotage it. So in order to be ready for digital transformation, you need a burning platform, you need a vision, and you need alignment. And so if the person says, I don't have the funding, I'd say, well, okay, we know you don't have the alignment. Do you have a vision? Do you have a vision? Maybe they do. Maybe they have a vision and they just haven't been able to sell it. Or maybe they don't even have a clear vision. In that case, you need a vision. And do you have a burning platform? Do you have an answer to the question, why can't we just keep doing what we were already doing? That seems a lot easier. And if you don't have a really good answer to that question, then, it's like if my wife said to me, hey, I have an idea. Let's buy a house on the other side of town and let's move there. I'd be like, well, that sounds like a big hassle. Why would we do that?
Yeah.
She's going to have to convince me and the whole family that, this isn't just a lot of unnecessary effort. We live in a perfectly nice house. But on the other hand, if she could convince us that our house is infested with termites and we can't stay here, and furthermore, convince us that that other house is amazing, and even though it'll be a lot of work to move there, our lives are going to be better once we move, then it might be like, okay, let's get some boxes. But you have to set those things in motion.
Yeah. Okay. And to get alignment now, like as a senior, you're a CEO and founder of From, like if there's no alignment in an organization, what would you say the CEO should do in that case?
It's funny because I often think so much of this job that I do and so much of leadership is really just about psychology. Look at it this way. the whole purpose of digital transformation really is to get your customers to do what you want them to do.
Yes.
If you could get them to do what you want them to do, to buy from you, to buy more, et cetera, then you're going to be running a great business. And the reason that it's bad to become irrelevant is because then your customers stop doing what you want them to do. So you have to get them, you have to drive their behavior. And how do we accomplish this transformation? By getting your employees to do what you want them to do, and your board of directors and your partners and your suppliers and your distributors or whatever. But you get the people that aren't your customers, but all these other stakeholders. So much of this job is just about getting people to do what you want them to do. So when it comes down to, when you're saying, if you're the CEO and you don't have that alignment, you need to be persuasive. Now, how do you do that? Well, like I mentioned before, burning platform, communicate a vision, and create belief that it's possible. Another thing that's really valuable is think about, for each different individual constituent, what's in it for them and what would be their points of resistance that you have to overcome. Because if people are not on board, there's a reason. If you go to the people who head the call center and you say, we want to create this new customer self-service portal and people are going to be able to answer all their questions on their phone, and there's going to be a chat bot, and the guy who's in charge of the call center, or woman in charge of the call center, isn't really a supporter, well, you know what? Maybe he's going to have to, or she's going to have to fire half the people in the call center, because you're not going to need so many people on the phone anymore. Maybe that person sees this isn't good for their career. Their area of expertise, call centers, is going to become less important to the company. And the stuff that's becoming more important, like making apps, that's not what they know about. So all of a sudden they start to see this career trajectory where they become less and less important. They have fewer and fewer people reporting to them. Well, if you think about it that way, is it really a surprise that they're not supporting this initiative, even if it's what the company needs to be successful? I mean, it's only natural, you know. But if you go to another group, if you go to the sales team, they don't care about the call center. So that's not going to be their reason for not supporting it. They may have a totally different reason. So if you really want to persuade people, don't think of them as one monolithic block of people, but say, how are these groups of people different? And what really are their concerns? And what are the things that would really motivate them? You know, I'll give you one quick example. I worked on a project many years ago for a huge auto insurance company. And we were designing a web-based tool so that insurance agents could do quotes and issue car insurance policies. And the pre-existing system was a green screen system. You're familiar with green screen systems?
Yes.
Yeah. So you had to learn and memorize all kinds of weird commands, and you had to know out all 16 function keys and what every function key did, right?
Yeah.
It was not an easy to use system. In fact, it took people typically as much as a year of doing the policy work, working for one of these agencies before they had really mastered the system. And of course, so when we came out and said, well, we have this new system, we're going to be rolling it out, you can learn it in like a day. It's really simple. Just point and click, use your mouse. Who wouldn't want that?
Everyone wants it.
How about the people? Yeah. How about the people who already spent a year and learned, memorized all those weird commands that now know them? How about those people who have job security, because they know that if someone wants to replace them, they're going to have to train someone for a year before they're as good at the job as they are. So when they go and ask for a raise, their boss is going to say, oh, geez, you know, I can't wait a year. So I'm going to have to give this person a raise to keep them. There's a lot of reasons why it's not good for those people. So, you know, in that case, one of the things that we did is we went out and we talked to these people and understood, why is this not good for them? And what about this new system was potentially really beneficial to them? And here's one thing we learned. One feature of this new system, not the main feature, it was just one feature to my mind, to our mind as designers of the system. It was just one feature, number 63, you know, was the ability to print the insurance card on a regular printer. Because in the old system, if you wanted to issue the card that proves that the person had insurance, what would happen is it would get printed back some other place and it would be mailed to the person. So if you came into the office and you signed up for auto insurance and you paid, the agent then had to say, okay, you're going to receive in the mail this thing that proves that you have auto insurance. But, if you get pulled over by a policeman in the 3 or 4 days between then and when you get it, you're going to have to explain it. It's going to be a whole hassle.
Yeah.
And so this new system just allowed you to print it in the office, print something that you could hand somebody and they could walk out of the office and immediately put that in their glove compartment. Well, these same people, they loved it because they hated having to tell customers that they weren't going to get their insurance card for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
So, I was really shocked how in love with this feature they were. So, we only learned that through researching these people. So when we then started to communicate to this group of people, these agents who already knew how to use the old system, we didn't talk about how easy it was to use and how quickly you could learn it. That was bad for them. Don't say that. We talked about printing the ID card in the office because that was what they liked. Yeah. But to a different group, talking to the executives at the company, they didn't care about that. They cared about it was going to be easier they could hire people, they could train people faster. So you have to sort of develop your communications plan by segment because you may have a very different reason why they're willing to get on board for one group than another.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good tip. Those are wonderful tips. Thank you so much for that. So
Sure.
I'd love you to tell us about from your organization or your company. Tell us the services and the solutions that you offer to people out there.
Sure. Well, we help executives at large companies become the heroes that save their brands, that keep their brands relevant to today's customers. That's what we do. How do we do that? Well, we've been talking about it. We do it through helping them, working with them to drive digital transformation, doing customer research, helping envision both small changes and transformational changes to the customer journey, helping to use design thinking to create the requirements and build out new products like websites and mobile apps and chatbots and virtual reality and all kinds of things, and then helping them with the organizational issues, helping them build a case for change, helping them get the funding that they need, helping them to keep the organization on board through what is often a long journey. Sometimes companies hire us to do a project that's just a few months long, and we can do that. But many of the clients that we work with, they work with us over the course of a few years because we're helping them with a larger transformation of their business. And then the financial impact of that can be absolutely amazing. We have a lot of customers who say, there's hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue associated with the changes that we've helped them drive. It's not all us, of course. Organizations have to be the ones to change. We can't do everything for them, but we're there to help guide it, help them figure out what to do because we've done it so many times. We work with people who are experts at their company, who are experts in their industry. Those are the executives, but we've done this across lots of industries with lots of companies. And so it's a good combination, because we have the perspective of seeing it across lots of organizations and lots of different types of customers. So we collaborate with the people who really understand their customer and their company. And then together we can usually figure out the best path, or at least a really good path.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm going to also place the link in the show notes of this episode for anyone who is out there, maybe a big organization who is listening to this also could just get across to you and become a client of yours also. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to chat with anybody. And also we have a lot of free content, thought leadership, videos, articles and other things are useful to companies who are trying to do this stuff as well. So happy to help in any way that we can.
Thank you so much for that. So how do you use your services to help clients to leverage in the market or to maximize their competitiveness in the market also?
Well, I think everything we're talking about is about maximizing their competitiveness. I think that, the number one way a business maximizes their competitiveness is by being more valuable to their customer. That's it. If you're a better restaurant, if you are a grocery store with fresher food or more selection or faster delivery or whatever else, find the things that matter to your customer and be better. Because after all, what is business? Business is an exchange of value, right? You give me some dollars or some euros or whatever, and I give you, I don't know, whatever I'm going to give you. Maybe it's a pair of glasses. Maybe I'm going to do your taxes, whatever. I'm going to do something for you. I'm going to services or goods. You're going to give me money. So if I want you to give me more money, I've got to do more for you so that you're happy to give me more money.
Yes.
And one of the risks that any business has faced is that there's somebody else out there who's also trying to do more for your money. And so you're going to have to decide, do you want to do business with me or do you want to do business with the competitor? So in the book, for example, I talk about competitive analysis and how to look out in the marketplace and evaluate what your competitors are doing, because that's definitely one ingredient in effective competition. But honestly, focusing on your customer, I think, is much more important than focusing on your competitor. After all, you could just mimic what your competitor's doing. Who knows if what they're doing is even all that good?
That's true.
But when you really understand the customer and what they need, and then you can come up with innovative new ways of meeting their needs better, then your competitor is probably going to have a hard time keeping up with you. So that's the first place I would look and focus on to be more competitive. But of course, it's also good to know what they're doing, because if they're doing the same things you're doing, then you may need to find something additional to do.
Yes. Oh, that's so wonderful, Howard. Thank you so much for that. I was going to ask you that, okay, what kind of tips and advice would you give young entrepreneurs out there, or young founders or CEOs out there? But what you just said right now for me is like, a take home note already. But I don't know if you have more things to share, more, words of advice, things that you wish people told you, 10, 20 years earlier in your career or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think the number one tip is that the greatest enemy of success is always fear. There's another Shakespeare quote, which is that our doubts are traitors. And I forget the rest of the quote, but essentially the quote says, our doubts are traitors, and they make us not take action and not do the thing we fear, even though it might be the best thing for us. And you can look it up online if you want to see what the actual exact quote is, but it definitely starts with our doubts are traitors. And so I think that, a lot of people have a vision for what they want to do, a business they want to create, or a way they want to evolve their business. And there's always a million reasons not to do something. I think what's key is to move forward. And then the kinds of principles we've been talking about together over the last half hour or so, which is, don't just execute a vision, be connected with your customer, because no matter what business you're in, your success or failure is going to be driven by the behavior of your customers first and foremost. So make sure you understand them. Don't fall in love with your product, fall in love with your customer, and think about, how can I do more for the customer? If you use that as your rudder, as your North Star, as your guide, then that will lead you to success. And so do that.
Wow, thank you so much, Howard. I really appreciate everything I've been able to learn from you. All your information and details will be in the show notes of this episode. So I encourage people to get across to you, get connected with you, work with you also. I really appreciate the wonderful words of advice, and you shining more light on design thinking and journey mapping. That was so awesome for me. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.